Good morning, guys, and welcome to my unboxing and review of the Master Grade Strike Rouge with Ootori Striker pack. For brevity's sake, I'm just going to be calling this the Master Grade Strike Rouge. This is a 2013 standard release that I got for around $51, which is honestly really surprising that it was that cheap considering, or that relatively cheap, considering what you get in this box, because the Strike Rouge with Ootori Striker pack, which is in seed essentially a practical version of the Perfect Strike. While that was kind of an unwieldy monster, this shrinks down some of the weapons, and because of the improvements to, I think, the reactor or the batteries or something, with the Strike Rouge, it had some kind of power saving system that actually enabled it to have any kind of decent operating time, because the Perfect Strike famously had to equip a ton of battery packs, which added a ridiculous amount of weight onto it. So anyway, getting right into the box here, as per usual, we have very nice art of the Strike Rouge here, firing off all the missiles, charging forward with the two large, I don't know if those are beam cannons or rail cannons or something. I'll throw it up on screen now. At the side, beam rifle at the side, beam shield at the ready, with the Ootori pack being not quite front and center, but very prominent on the art here, the Freedom Gundam in the back. Very dynamic, very cool box art. On the bottom here, it's going to just be showing off the painted build of the Strike Rouge with Ootori Striker pack, showing off how large and impressive this model kit is, showing off the Ootori pack by itself, and then showing off some of the weapons and gimmicks that this kit has with the large sword, showing off some kind of articulation. Oh, I think that's just showing off that the Ootori pack itself can transform with the jet kind of cockpit slash nose thing, swinging down to just seamlessly mount it onto the Strike Rouge itself, showing off the weapons there. Showing off a number of articulation gimmicks, and then showing off the marking decals on the right, as well as the pilot figure there of Kigali. On the other side then, we have some information talking about the Seed Destiny HD remaster in terms of both the anime and the comic slash manga, showing off here that we will be getting an included action base here to pose the Strike Rouge Ootori in the air. As you might expect from this kind of design, this kit definitely looks way better in the air, and it's probably going to be extremely back heavy, so it really needed the action base. This is going to be the same action base that we got in the Master Grade Aile Striker RM, which this kit is heavily based off of. If I'm not mistaken, I believe the base Strike Rouge itself is just going to be a recolor of the Aile Striker RM. And then here it is showing off the showing off the line art version of the Strike Rouge, as well as all the other kind of original GAT frame suits that we do have model kits of: the Duel, the Buster, the Strike, the Aegis, and the Blitz. Of these, I've only built the Duel. I really like that kit. It's one of my favorite Master Grades. It is awesome. I do have the Buster in the backlog, but I do plan to build all of them at some point. Also surprising for the sheer amount of stuff it seems like you're going to be getting in the box is how kind of small this box is. It's standard size for a Master Grade box, but it's relatively thin. I was expecting it to be a lot bigger than this. But getting right into it, inside the box, we get 5 bags of runners, which is, again, a little less than I was expecting. It's a little surprising considering what you get in this box. But we are also going to get this standard Master Grade manual. Not exactly the same style that we've seen with the big black border with the art replicated in the middle, but here's a much zoomed in version of the box art there with the Strike Rouge front and center, just with the background removed. Getting into it, we are going to be getting information about the Strike Rouge, I think its development and the general story of Seed Destiny. This is before Bandai started printing things in English in addition to Japanese. This is just going to be in Japanese. Also, we are going to be getting the simplified build guide, the simplified build order here, and then we're going to be getting the parts list. So this does look like it's going to have more parts than a typical Master Grade, although not like a crazy amount extra. So of course, beyond that, it looks like this is going to be a pretty standard Master Grade build, starting off with the torso there, going into the head, and then the arms. So yeah, all the usual stuff. Yeah, and then the waist and legs. Of course, in the middle, we are going to be getting a full color doubles page spread of the Strike Rouge Ootori here, showing off all of the weapons, the gimmicks, showing off the cockpit hatch there. We have like a CG render of it with, I'm not exactly sure what that is. That might be the Murasame, showing off the Ootori pack here with some pretty nice line art for all of the individual weapons on there. The big sword, the missile pod, all of the missiles under the wings, the large rail cannons that swing out underneath the Ootori's arms. Showing off some poses here, and again advertising the Seed Destiny HD remaster, both the anime and the manga. And of course, another big CG render up here on the right, alongside showing off the arsenal. Yeah, after you build the legs and then assemble the kit itself, or assemble the base mobile suit itself, you get into the weapons, which looks a little underwhelming. That looks kind of high grady with two halves sandwiching together and then some stuff mounting on top. A little disappointed in that, but we are going to be getting a recolor of the exact same shield that came with both the Strike RM and the Dual Gundam. The Armor Schneiders there, very simple weapons. And then, of course, the main star of the show here, the Ootori pack. So it looks like the Ootori itself is going to be getting a pretty significant chunk of the remaining manual here. But yeah, it looks like the Ootori is just going to have a lot of parts layering and things like that, so all very nice to see. Of course, we have a nice big fold-out section here of assembling the large, I think, rail cannons after the Ootori, assembling everything together, mounting the sword and the missile pod and all that, building the display stand, because again, this kit really does need an action base with how back heavy it's going to be and how great it looks in the air. And then mounting the Ootori Striker pack, showing off how to use some of the weapons. And then we get the decal guide, which looks like it's going to be quite extensive. Looks like it's going to be a decent amount of decals. The Ootori itself has a slightly darker color scheme than the normals, or the Strike Rouge has a slightly darker color scheme than the standard Strike, so I'm wondering how well these sticker-style decals are going to show up on the kit, but I believe this is old enough that's also going to be getting a mix of sticker style decals and dry transfers, so those dry transfers are probably going to be looking a lot nicer than the sticker style decals. And then of course we have the nice painted build up here of the Strike Rouge Ootori and the color guide. Lots of this is being kind of over the top seed kit. This is going to be using a lot of different colors. Here are the colors here. If you can pause if you want to use any of these in your builds, but again, you will need to translate it because it's all in Japanese. So, as for the contents of the bags, so inside the bags we are going to be getting 17 runners, which is a bit more than I was expecting, but I think they did cram in more runners per bag than is usual, as well as, very unfortunate, this very large color correcting sticker sheet. It looks like we are going to be getting some of the usual here with eye cameras, head cameras, and a camera for the beam rifle. Fortunately, it looks like we are going to be getting a lot of accent parts here in black and red, or in like metallic red/pink there, but most unfortunately we have this gigantic section of yellow stripe details. So I'm not sure exactly what these are going to be for, presumably for things like the missiles, but it's a little unfortunate that we do need all of this to make a color accurate kit. We're also going to get this fairly large sheet of sticker style decals. Again, a little unfortunate that these are sticker style, but it's a standard release master grade. This is kind of to be expected. A lot of markings for orb here, unit markings 210 there for the Rouge. We have this kind of honeycomb pattern there. I think these were also on the dual for decals. We have the markings there for the Ootori pack, and then a bunch of general like red warning / stripe details. And of course, this being a slightly older master grade, this is of course going to come with a dry transfers, which I do quite like. They look a lot better than sticker style. I almost wish these were all of them were dry transfer, but I recognize that some of them, like the stripes and wraparound stickers and things like that, can't be dry transfers. A bunch of nice logos and model numbers and things like that on the dry transfer sheet here. So getting into the runners themselves. So these runners were printed in April of 2023, and starting with PC 130 here for a sheet of poly caps. Of course, this being an slightly older high grade is going to be using some poly caps for the joints. Not super extensive, but this will be using some of them. If I remember right, on the Master Grade Dual Gundam, which I have built, these weren't really an issue, so I'm not expecting these to be a problem. They are serviceable. So, starting with runner A here, a multicolor runner coming in 3 colors. This is from the original Aile Strike RM. So, this is going to be in 3 colors. We have a pink tinted white here for a lot of armor parts for things like the skirts there. We have our standing and sitting pilot figures there. I'm not sure if these are the ones that are going to be used. I'm pretty sure this is Kira and not Kigali. We have a bunch of our white parts here, including parts for the muzzle, head camera, V-fin, back of the head, etc. We have a number of accent parts here in this, I guess, almost burgundy color, almost magenta tinted, for things like the torso there. We have a bunch of auxiliary armor parts, and I believe we have things for parts like chest fence. And then we have some parts here in plain clear for parts for the head, for the eye cameras, head camera, and the beam rifle camera. Runner B here, holding the label just Seed X armor, for a number of, I guess, generic armor parts between all of the GAT frame kits. with parts for the backs of the hands, a bunch of armor parts for like the legs and arms, as well as the inner frame part for the shield there. A very, very small runner C in pink here, also labeled Seed X armor. These are going to be parts for the feet. Runner D here in ABS, because again, this being a slightly older master grade, this was before ABS frames went out of fashion. This runner is also going to be labeled Seed X frame. It's going to contain a number of frame parts for the legs. We have parts for our swappable finger style hands. We have the collar here, the action base adapter. C-clips for, I think, for the skirts, the inner frame part for the shield, as well as a number of other inner frame parts. Runner E, also labeled as Seed X frame, still in a dark ABS, containing a bunch more frame parts, inner frame parts for the feet. We have the cockpit there, parts for the waist, including a hip drop mechanism, parts for, I think, the knees. We have parts for the legs themselves, parts for the thighs, etc. Runner F here, still labeled Seed X frame, still in ABS, for a number of extra frame parts, including parts for the forearms. I believe these are parts for the feet or ankles or something like that, and then parts for the waist. Runner G, still from the Aile Striker RM, going to include a bunch of extra armor parts in this pink tinted white, including parts for the skirts, parts for the legs, etc., as well as the blades for our armor Schneiders here, also in that pink tinted white. Not sure if these are supposed to be the color of the blades or if I need to paint them in like gray or silver or something, but we'll find out. Runner H2 here, still from the Aile Striker RM, including parts for the lower torso, I believe the cockpit hatch, and some auxiliary head antennas. Runner L here in this very dark gray, almost black color. I think this is ABS because of how shiny it is, but this is going to include extra swappable fingers for our hands. We have inner frame parts for the skirts. We have some small thruster details, as well as all the parts we need for our beam rifle. Runner M here, still from the Aile Striker RM, going to contain a number of armor parts in black here, very recognizable parts for the torso and legs, among other parts. All right, starting with new runners for the Striker Rouge. Here we have Runner N, labeled for the Striker Rouge RM. This is going to be a number of new parts for weapons for the Otori pack, including the blade for the large sword here, the beam effect for the sword, the large, I think, rail cannons that flip out under the arms, a number of red accent parts for, I think, the Ootori Striker pack. Runner O here in that pink tinted white, going to be many of the wing parts for the Otori pack. These are also going to be labeled for the Striker Rouge RM. And as you can see, these wings are very nicely detailed. It's going to look really, really nice after I panel line it. Runner P for the Striker Rouge RM, going to be more parts for the Otori Striker pack, including parts for the missile pods and all of the kind of underwing missile parts that sit on the wings of the Otori. Unfortunately, these look like they are going to be horribly color inaccurate. I'll have to double check, but I don't think they're just supposed to be all white like that. I think this is where all those yellow stripes are going to come in, and that's if I don't have to repaint this in a different color for it to be color accurate. Runner Q in this black PS plastic for a number of additional parts, including a black part for the shield here, a number of kind of blade accent parts for the wings, I believe, and a number of like kind of vent parts. And then Runner R from the Striker Rouge RM in a black ABS for a number of for all of the frame parts we are going to need for the Otori pack. And last but certainly not least, we have the action base that comes with the Aile Striker RM, which is also included here, and the Striker Rouge. This is going to be labeled Runner BA2. Not sure exactly why they went with that label, considering the action base 2 looks nothing like this. I think this is the same action base that was included, obviously, with the Aile Striker RM, but also with things like the Master Grade Thunderbolt Gundam, the Master Grade Full Armor Thunderbolt Gundam Verka, which I have. This base, if it's the same one as that, is fine. It's a little simple and doesn't really have any articulation and just serves to get the kit in the air, but that's really all it needs to do. So with all that out of the way, I will see you after the build. All right, welcome back. Here's the Master Grade Striker Rouge, all snap built, panel lined, and decal with the included sticker style and dry transfer decals. So I have it here without the Ootori Striker pack because I feel like the two should be talked about a little bit separately, especially in terms of the aesthetic, but this also just makes it a lot easier for me to do articulation and stuff without the Ootori Striker pack mounted on the back because it is huge and gets in the way a lot. But getting right into the build, the Striker Rouge Gundam is pretty typical of all of the Master Grade Seed kits that use the Seed X frame. That I don't know if it started with the Aile Striker RM or the Dual Gundam in 2012, but it's a fairly solid build. It's a little simpler than something like the ARC 78-2 2.0 build that I've taken a look, or the 2.0 frame-based builds that I've taken a look at multiple times on this channel, but it's more than solid enough. The only problem I will bring up is that this frame is very, very tight. there were multiple parts of the frame that I had to use pliers to actually sandwich the parts together because they just wouldn't go on, particularly the pegs going from the torso into the shoulders, which is also an issue with the Master Grade Astray frame, which I believe uses a pretty similar construction in terms of being a seed-based in terms of being an ABS frame for a seed property that also has a very similar problem of tightness. In addition, this Seed X frame also shares a similar problem to the ARC 72 2.0 frame with the legs going into the hips, where it's very easy for the peg to not fully go into the hip, even though it feels like it is, and it will just pop off once you're articulating it. There will, unlike the ARC 72 2.0 frame where you just kind of have to guess, there is a very kind of, I guess, tactile and audible click when the leg fully goes into the socket, so just make sure you do that if you build this kit. If you don't, your legs are going to be falling off pretty easily. That was a problem I was seeing especially on the ARC 72 2.0 kits, which have a very kind of similar structure for the hip, with the leg going into it. I was seeing complaints about, like, the Gym Sniper 2 with, like, its legs falling off easily just because people didn't know that you had to, like, really get the leg into the socket. But all that aside, the build is a little bit simplified for a Master Grade, but it is more than solid. Everything just kind of makes sense in terms of the build. There's nothing strange or unintuitive or anything like that. And the build, despite using a bit of an aged ABS frame, is fairly solid. Now, getting into aesthetics then. The Strike is pretty interesting as far as kind of basic protagonist Gundam suits go, and this is pretty much just a color swap of it aesthetically, going from the very normal Gundam tricolor that the normal Strike uses to this red shifted tricolor using pink, burgundy, and this pink tinted white as the main color scheme, which is fairly unique. It's one or two steps removed from being like a Strike Trans Am, but that's besides the point. This is a pretty unique color scheme, especially for the time that it was designed. I will note, though, in terms of the sculpt, that there's a bunch of differences from the line art, because Seed line art is notoriously kind of very jank, with a lot of the designs looking way chunkier than they actually do and that they're supposed to look. So this model kit is kind of the way, I guess, the Strike was intended to look proportionally, with it being very slender, as opposed to the very kind of chunky, thick line art from Seed. But there are also a bunch of interesting details where the frame kind of pokes through, where you have these kind of bars on the tops and the bottoms of the shoulders framing the plating. You have these ridges coming out of the torso. You have details like this kind of darker gray accent kind of framing the side of the leg going around the knee, as well as this bit of frame poking out near the bottom of the legs on the sides. There's just a lot of interesting frame poking out, not as much as like the Astray frame, not as much as the Master Grade Astrays, of course, but it's enough to kind of differentiate itself and be interesting compared to a lot of other, I guess, more basic Gundam designs. So yeah, the base Strike actually does look quite good, and I am a fan of it. It's faithful to the way the Strike, I believe, was intended to look, as opposed to how it actually looks in line art, so that's pretty cool. In terms of color correcting stickers then, I'm just going to go over the few that are actually on the Strike Rouge itself very quickly, because the vast majority of these, apart from this tiny top left section, everything else is for the Ootori Striker pack, which is why I want to talk about it separately, because while the base Strike Rouge is pretty accurate to how the Strike was intended to look and looks very cool, there's pretty much no color corrections needed. The Ootori Striker pack is a much different story. I don't know what it is with Seed kits, but Bandai seems to nail the base mobile suit in terms of color accuracy and all that, and then kind of shit the bed in terms of accessories with like a bunch of most of the Seed kits I've built, minus something like the Real Grade Force Impulse. They've all had kind of pretty bad color accuracy problems with their accessories, particularly if they have very large backpacks, very complex backpacks, like the Strike Rouge with Ootori Striker pack does here. But anyway, going over the color correcting stickers very quickly. One is, of course, going to be green and black metallic stickers for the eyes. Very, very normal for a Master Grade. Sticker 2 is going to be the front head camera here. Sticker 3 is going to be the rear head camera. There is a clear part underneath everything for both the eyes and the head cameras. If you want to, you can just paint over the parts. Unfortunately, it's plain clear and not green clear, so you will have to paint it metallic green to be color accurate, but that's fine, to be honest. And sticker 4 is going to be used in the beam rifle here for kind of the basic Strike accessories. For this very nicely detailed scope part in the middle there, there is a clear part underneath it, and it's detailed with all of the details that are on the sticker. So if you wanted to, you can just kind of paint it in metallic green or metallic clear green or something. Just instead of using the sticker, but this looks quite nice. So before moving on to anything else, quickly getting into the Ootori Striker pack. So here's the Ootori Striker pack on the stand that both the Aile Striker RM and the Striker Rouge with Ootori Striker pack comes with. As you can see, it is very, very large. The giant sword poking out the back along with the very large wingspan means I will have a bit of trouble spinning around in the booth, especially in the posing section. I am going to be switching to like the Action Base, I think 4, that comes with like Super Robot Wars kits, because as you can see, this stand is extremely tall. This kit, or the Ootori pack itself, is about to touch the kind of light diffusing cloth I have at the top of my photo booth. So yeah, it's just not really practical to have it spinning around with the strike gun mounted to it in the posing section. But anyway, quickly getting into the aesthetics of the Ootori Striker pack. The sculpt is quite good. It's very similar to the base Strike Rouge Gundam. There are some changes from the line art very similar to the base mobile suit. Notably in the intakes here, these kind of red spikes in the middle are not there on the line art. It's just kind of a basic red framing of the front of, I believe those are intakes on the wings. Either intakes or engines on the wings. I don't know exactly what they are. I'm pretty sure they're intakes. But anyway, the actual Ootori Striker pack is very, very color inaccurate and is extremely sticker heavy. As you can see, all of these yellow stripe stickers, all of the red stripe stickers on the cannons here, all of those are color correcting stickers. Those are supposed to be there on the line art. Don't confuse it with the red dashes here and the red lines over here that are just optional decals that you don't have to include. But there are a ton of color corrections that you need to do on the Ootori Striker pack that you also need to paint in, because not everything is covered by the color correcting stickers. Notably on the missiles, they are just plain white out of the box, and you do have to paint it for it to be color accurate. I use seed gray on both the backs here and the front, and seed yellow for the ring around the middle there to make it color accurate. On, I believe this is the beam cannon. One of these two is the beam cannon, the other is the railgun. I don't remember exactly which is which. I think this is the beam cannon, but there's a red kind of scope down here. It is, of course, just molded in black on the runner. I painted it in seed red. On the missile pod up here, all of these 4 barrels here that I think fire out the little missiles, those are just in white on the runner. You have to paint them in gray for them to be color accurate. On the back, as this spins around, you're going to see these, I guess, auxiliary thrusters or something on the backs of these side fins there. Those are just in the kind of pale blue that they come molded in on the runner. You need to paint those in red. On the large anti-ship sword, the pommel there is just in black. You need to paint that in white for it to be color accurate. Again, on the missile pod, as it spins around, you'll see there is a dark gray ring right before the white part on the back. That also needs to be painted in. It is in the same kind of gray-blue that the body of the missile pod is in. In general, there are a lot of little painted details that you need to make on the Ootori Striker pack for it to be color accurate. Not even getting into the stickers. So getting into it, stickers 5 and 6 then are going to be the black details on this kind of maned tail fin on the back there. You see there's a small black part right there, right underneath the white. That is a sticker. You get 1 for each side, of course. Sticker 7 you get 2 of. They are going to be for the propellant tanks there, for the red stripe on them. Sticker 8 and 9 are going to be the red triangle stickers on the front of the beam cannon there. Stickers 10 and 11 are going to be the very long red stripes also on the beam cannon for these wraparound foil parts down here right above the black. Stickers 12 and 13 are also going to be foil red stickers there for these small wraparound kind of curved lines around the front of the beam cannon. Stickers 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20 are all going to be the yellow stripe details you see all over the quad wings on the side and the tail fins on the back. Very annoying to put on. They are very kind of difficult to line up. You do need to slide them around a little bit with like a hobby knife or something to get them to fit properly. And even then, they don't look the greatest. Again, because these are straight line details, I would recommend you just kind of mask them off and paint them in yourself. It is, I honestly think that would be way less tedious than actually putting the stickers on yourself. So yeah, apart from that, I do think the mold and stuff for the Ootori pack is very, very good. It's just these color apps that really, really are disappointing to see, especially on a somewhat modern master grade. Again, the kit's over 10 years old, but still, you see a lot of the stuff here that you see on a modern master grades, minus things like the ABS frame and drive transfers, which unfortunately Bandai have really phased out because they do look quite good on dark surfaces, unlike stickers, as you see with the decal on the wing there. Like this is just, that's on a completely black surface, so if it was a sticker style decal, you would see the border, like say the Striker Rouge, with decals being on the dark red parts of like of the crotch and the torso, and on the back there on this very dark gray part. I don't know how you can see that. The borders are very apparent and they look quite bad compared to how dry transfers look on those colors. So getting into a quick size comparison here, here is the Master Grade Striker Rouge version RM, right next to a standard size high grade being the high grade Blue Destiny Unit 1, and a standard size Master Grade being the Master Grade Gem Sniper 2 White Dingo team. As you can see, the Striker Rouge being a color swap of the basic protagonist Gundam of Seed is going to be exactly standard head height for a Master Grade, 18 meters tall. So yeah, it is going to take up, the base Gundam at least is going to take up about the same space as a typical Master Grade. Just keep in mind that once you put the Ootori Striker pack on, the gigantic wingspan of it is going to take up a ton of horizontal space on your shelf, so just keep that in mind. You'll see that in the posing section. In terms of accessories, here's the Master Grade Striker Rouge with everything it comes with, minus the Ootori pack, of course, because, again, it's very large, doesn't quite fit in this spread with everything else, but we'll talk about that after these other accessories. So starting as usual with the hand options, these are going to be swappable finger-style hands with the thumb on a ball joint. Apart from the closed fist that you see on the kit there, you will also get a nice pair of open expressive hands, one for each side, a set of standard holding hands, one for each side, and a set of trigger finger hands, one for each side. So pretty much everything you would expect. Nice to see the swappable finger-style hands. You will get a standing pilot figure of Kigali right here. Again, I was wrong in the unboxing, even though that runner is from the base Aile Striker RM. The pilot figures in there are for Kigali, so I'm not sure if they changed only that one part for this kit and just didn't relabel the runner, and that used to be Kira before or not. I have not built the standard Aile Striker RM before. I have it in the backlog, the clear color version, so just let me know in the comments if they swap the pilot figures on that runner. You will, of course, get an action base adapter for the Striker Rouge itself. When you have the Ootori Striker pack on, you're not supposed to use this. You're supposed to use a different action base adapter that goes into the Ootori pack, that goes into the special stand that comes with the this kit and the Aile Striker RM. I'm going to be using this normal action base adapter when I pose it on the action base 4, and I'll just let you know how that balances and stuff. You will, of course, get this large shield that is identical to what you see in things like the Dual Gundam and the Aile Striker RM, just color swapped to be in black, burgundy, and that pink tinted white. So, of course, this does look quite nice. Again, you see these very nice dry transfers there that do look quite good on this very dark color, unlike standard sticker-style decals. Very nice color separation there. On the back here, I don't know if it's supposed to be color separated, if this back part is supposed to be in like a frame gray or something. It's just in that pink tinted white with some gray frame parts for this bar on the top, the adapter with the peg to go onto the back of the arm there, and this auxiliary handle. Now for mounting it onto the back of the arm, of course, this arm can swing around and rotate and stuff if you want the shield to be on the side of the arm rather than the back. Pretty typical stuff. This handle, unfortunately, does not articulate on its own, but there is a hole in it for the tab in the standard holding hand to go into, but you can just pop it out and mount it like so, if you want the Striker Rouge to be holding onto the shield with its hand. Otherwise, you just kind of clip onto the arm and that's that. You can also move this handle up here if you want. I don't know why you would, but you can do that. You will also get this very standard Strike beam rifle. I'm pretty sure this is the exact same beam rifle that came with the standard Strike. It's fairly basic. I do like the design of this beam rifle used by the Strike Gundam as far as generic beam rifles go. This is one of the better ones in my opinion. But yeah, it's entirely in that shiny ABS frame gray. Apart from the scope, which is green, you will have a secondary handle that will swing side to side. Apart from that, not really much to say. It's just a solid beam rifle. You will get this beam effect to use with the large anti-ship sword, which you'll see in a moment. It just kind of slots into two holes on like kind of the ends of the beam saber, with a small kind of hole for this little peg to slot into in the middle just to hold it stable. So yeah, it's a fine beam effect. You'll see it in the posing section. So getting into the Ootori Striker pack then, of course this is the main draw of this specific kit. It is the main unique striker pack that comes with it, but of course it's going to contain pretty much all of the main weapons for the Striker Rouge apart from the beam rifle and the shield. You have 12 missiles, 6 on the underside of each kind of pair of wings there. That you don't have anything to pose them kind of flying around. You can remove them. One thing I forgot to mention is the connection between both the missiles and the propellant tank and the wings are quite small. When I was paneling the underside of the wings there with all these nice details, I accidentally opened this one a little too far and the connection snapped for this propellant tank, so I had to plastic cement it back in place. Just something to keep in mind, the connection is rather fragile. Just be careful when you're handling it, especially if you're holding it by the wings. You will of course get the large beam, the beam cannon and the railgun down here on these two articulated arms that kind of swing out underneath the Striker Rouge's armpits when it's ready to fire. Otherwise it just kind of swings down like so. Of course there is a point of articulation near the top there, so it can rotate as you want. So yeah, you can kind of maneuver and swing this around as you wish. You don't really get that much side-to-side articulation, but you can pivot it a little bit. Of course, when you want to mount it onto the back of the Striker Rouge, this entire kind of cockpit section will slide forward and then fold down so that this tab can go into the polycap in the back of the Striker Rouge's torso, so to mount the Ootori Striker pack. Again, you'll see that in the posing section. The wings, of course, can articulate. They'll open up when you attach it to the Striker Rouge. They will form this large kind of X-wing shape when it's attached to the Striker Rouge's back, so that's fine. These two auxiliary kind of tail fins there can articulate. They can swing forward and back, like so. Same thing for this main stabilizer. It's just kind of up when it's in the Ootori kind of... when the Ootori is flying around separately, but when it's attached to the Strike, this will, of course, kind of fold down, I believe, just to get out of the way. And then you have the two kind of back weapons on the Ootori. You have this missile pod here that just kind of... you can swivel it a little bit, and it can articulate and swing around when it's in use on this arm, but apart from that, not really much to say about it. It's just kind of there. Meanwhile, for the kind of large, impressive handheld weapon of the Striker Rouge, you have the anti-ship sword there, which is held pretty tightly on this little mount, so you just pull it off. And then you have this large sword. Not really much to say, there's pretty much no articulation to speak of on it. It's just a large, impressive sword that you can have the Striker Rouge swinging around, which looks quite nice. One point of articulation I forgot to mention on the Ootori Striker pack is that the wings themselves, this large, like, engine, I guess, or intake or something, that the wings are actually attached to, can rotate. They're just on a ball joint that can do ball joint things, so you can do that if you want. So getting into articulation on the Striker Rouge then, this is going to be the same articulation that you've seen on any other Master Grade C kit that uses the Seed X-frame. So if you build anything like the Duel, the Buster, I assume the Blitz and the Aegis also use the same X-frame, you'll know exactly what to see here. I'll run through it pretty quickly if you haven't built those. So starting with the head as usual, for an upward look, you will get quite a far upward look. For a downward look, it can look down into its own chest. You will get some side-to-side tilt, but nothing super impressive. Of course, it can 360 about the peg. Just be careful because the antennas can pop off relatively easily. For the shoulders then, the entire joint will swing out of the chest. Just make sure to work the joints a little bit before you try articulating anything crazy, because it's very similar to something like the RG Unicorn. This very stiff frame can be prone to snapping if you don't work it in before you bend it like that. So yeah, you will get a fairly decent shoulder swing outwards. The shoulder can articulate independently of the arm, and for side raises then, you will get not quite last shooting, but pretty close. Very nice upward side raise from the arm there. Of course, the entire shoulder joint will pivot upwards when you do that. Full rotation in the upper bicep, as you would expect. Double joint in the elbow. Unfortunately, like I was talking about earlier, the frame is a bit simplified compared to something like the RX-78 2.0 frame, so there's no inner kind of sliding frame details when you bend the elbow, so this looks a little bit awkward here with this large hollow space near the end of the forearm, but it does the job fine. The wrist is going to be on a ball joint, which will do ball joint things. Like I mentioned, the thumb is also on a ball joint that can do ball joint things. In the torso then, for ab crunch, there's a joint that will give you quite a nice forward ab crunch, and not a great backwards ab crunch, but that's actually a good thing, because with how heavy and large these Striker packs are, you really don't want a super articulated back ab crunch, otherwise the entire torso is going to flop backwards, as we've seen in some of the real grades. But on here, that's not really an issue. You will get some pretty decent side to side crunch. You can get full 360 rotation about the ball joint there. Just be careful, you will knock some parts off, like the top of the crotch there and the side of the torso for this side. So just be careful when you spin around the Striker Rouge. All right, I'll put that part back on after this section is done. For the cockpit hatch then, the top part here is supposed to slide out on a rail. It's a little hard to actually grip and pull out, but it can just slide out on a rail. Yeah, I had to grab it with tweezers, but yeah, it can slide out on the rail like so. And then this bottom door will just open up to reveal the pilot figure of Kigali on the inside. I don't know how you can see that, but she's in there. For the waist then, the front skirts are of course going to be on separate ball joints, which will do ball joint things. You can raise it just under 90 degrees upwards. The side skirts do tend to pop off very easily. Just be careful when you're articulating them. But yeah, they will want to go about the same, a little under 90 degrees before they'll pop off. The doors can open up, revealing the other handheld accessory I forgot to mention, the armor Schneiders in there. I don't really know why you would want to pose the strike using these because of how kind of, I guess, dinky and uninteresting they are, but they are there if you want to use them. When they're in use, the knives will just fold out like so, but apart from that, they're very small knives, so relative to the Strike Rouge, so not super interesting accessories. The back skirts can articulate, but the two come together linked by a plastic rod. You can't really step them apart, otherwise they'll just slide out of the back there, but they can flip up almost 180 degrees, which is quite nice. For kicks then, for forward kicks, you will get about 90 degrees normally, but there is a hip drop mechanism, so if you drop the leg, it's a little tight to get the leg down, but if you drop the leg, you will get over 90 degree bend there, but just keep in mind the side skirts will pop off very easily due to how long they are, so yeah, just keep that in mind if you're articulating this doing some kind of crazy kick. With the leg down like that, for side kicks, you will get just under 90 degrees before you'll want to kick the side skirts off. And for back kicks, with the hip dropped, you can get over 90 degrees backwards pretty easily. So yeah, very nice to see. Just the actual hip drop mechanism itself is a little tight, so just be careful when you're manipulating that. You will, of course, get full rotation in the upper thigh, but you will need to drop the hip in order to get the full rotation, otherwise the leg's going to be colliding into stuff. You get a double bend in the knee with an armor slide gimmick in the kneecap right there, which is quite nice. It looks very good. In the ankles then, the armor can kind of wiggle around, but nothing super great, and note that it is a little loose and will want to just fall back down. There is heel-toe separation, but the entire midsection it's just separated into two parts, not three, so the entire midsection will tilt up almost 90 degrees. It will tilt downwards a small amount, can't be more than like 15-20 degrees. The entire foot will swing downwards fairly far, will swing upwards extremely far, and you will get some like mediocre side to side bend. So overall, articulation is pretty good on the strike, apart from the feet, but it is stable enough and basic enough that if you just have the strike by itself, it can stand up just fine, but we'll see how it handles it in some poses. So getting the Strike Rouge into a bit of a spin, starting with pretty much the only pose I would use with this kit where you don't have the Ootori Striker pack attached, and if you don't have any other striker packs to put on the Strike Rouge. Here it is in a running and gunning pose, firing the beam rifle up off to the side, with the Ootori Striker pack flying down about to merge with the Strike Rouge. Of course, if you put this on the shelf, you'll want to have the Ootori Striker pack a little bit back to kind of have it approach any more realistic angle to dock with the Strike Rouge's back, but of course, in my photo booth, on this rotating base, this is about as close as I could get without the Strike Rouge toppling backwards or the Strike Rouge's rifle colliding with the side of my photo booth. Anyway, this is a pretty good pose, and it demonstrates a few things. One, the Strike Rouge with its slim proportions definitely looks a lot better in motion than in a defensive pose or in a crouching pose, as you'll see later. But the Seed X frame is, while being very tight and a little bit difficult to pose, is very stable. The base Strike Rouge without anything on it can hit a running and gunning pose perfectly with no problems, as you might expect. Of course, once the Ootori Striker pack is on, it can't hit this pose, but that was a given how large the Ootori Striker pack is and how back heavy the kit is. The other thing I want to bring up are the fingers. While I do like swappable finger style hands much better than articulated style hands on master grades, the problem with the Seed X frame ones is that the tab in the fingers don't necessarily like click into any handheld weapons. It just kind of slots in, not really that tightly. It'll stop the weapon from shifting around that much once you have it stable in the hand, but before that it does tend to slide around very easily when you're adjusting the hand, and it tends to pop the fingers off. So it's a little bit annoying to get the weapons into the hands in a bit of a believable pose. It's a much bigger problem with something like the large anti-ship sword, which you'll see in a second, but for the beam rifle, it's mostly tolerable, and the Strike Rouge looks quite nice in this pose, and if I didn't have the Ootori pack mounted on the Strike Rouge, I would consider having the Strike Rouge do this on the shelf. So getting the Ootori Striker pack mounted onto the Strike Rouge, here it is on the ground swinging the large anti-ship sword. I'm trying to replicate the same pose that the Huckbein Mark II Trombe does in the box art. If you haven't watched my video on that kit is fantastic in articulation. It is one of the best articulators I've ever had the pleasure of working with. Unfortunately, this kit can't quite hold up, especially with the Ootori Striker pack on. It's extremely heavy. It keeps wanting to tilt the torso backwards. It was a bit of a struggle to get it balanced on the ground in this wide-legged pose. In addition to the legs not really cooperating and not getting as wide as I would want them to, another problem with that is even with the legs comparatively not as wide or dynamic as they could be in this kind of grounded melee pose. The side skirts kept wanting to fly off. They are very loose on there. So just keep that in mind when you build this kit. The side skirts tend to fly off once the legs moved out to the side a little bit, but in general, I think the pose looks great with the legs articulating like that, with the armor slide gimmick in the left leg on full display, with the kneecap kind of sliding up a little bit, the large anti-ship sword giving a lot of, I guess, color contrast with its blue and the clear pink beam effect part flying downwards. And the Ootori Striker pack adds a lot of mass to the Striker Rouge in a way that helps it really pop. I think it looks great with all this very super over-the-top geometry, really feeling like Seed. It looks really cool. Both the railgun and the beam cannon mounted on the Ootori Striker pack kind of flying backwards also helps give the kit a bit of aesthetic equilibrium with some extra stuff flying out the back near the bottom half, as opposed to it being super top heavy, visually at least, with the gigantic wings and that X-wing shape of the Ootori Striker. So yeah, in general, while the Ootori isn't the greatest in terms of dynamic melee poses like this is certainly cool, and I would consider it doing this on the shelf, as long as you can get it balanced properly. It took me around 10 minutes to even get it balanced like this. So just to cover all my bases, here's the Striker Rouge in a kneeling pose, firing both the beam cannon and the railgun upwards at a target. This is to demonstrate the point that I mentioned earlier, that this kit doesn't look the greatest on the ground, especially with how the Ootori Striker pack has the general silhouette of a flight pack, so it really incentivizes this kit, at the very least, standing up on the ground. Having this grounded defensive pose, firing the railgun, the beam cannon, and the missile pod over its shoulder upwards at a target with the shield off to the side. While I think a lot of other kits could pull this off, this doesn't necessarily look the greatest. Again, the slim, almost athletic proportions of the Striker Rouge definitely lend itself to being either in motion or in the air, not this super defensive grounded pose. In addition, the very flight pack aesthetic of the Ootori Striker pack's wings really doesn't look that good on the ground. I would definitely recommend you not do this crouching pose, even though the base Striker Rouge can pull it off perfectly fine. And then, of course, getting it into the air on the Striker Rouge's action base adapter here on my Action Base 4 that came with the Super Robot Wars kit, doing my best impression at the iconic Aile Strike aerial firing off to the side pose with the beam rifle. One thing to note is that while it can balance on an action base with the action base adapter that goes into the Striker Rouge instead of the Ootori Striker pack on the base that comes with the Aile Strike RM/this kit, it does take a bit to get it balanced. It kept wanting to tilt either forwards or backwards. It was definitely a struggle. It did fall off the action base a few times. This is take, I think, 3 of filming this footage of it spinning around because it kept falling off the action base. So yeah, definitely if you get this kit, use the base that comes with it. It holds it a lot better than a standard action base does with how back heavy it is and how difficult it is to balance. I'm just doing it with the Striker Rouge's action base adapter just because I can't get it to spin around on the Aile Strike RM base in my photo booth. It's just way too tall. But this pose is extremely dynamic and really shows what you can pull off with this kit when you're not limited by having to balance it on the ground with how back heavy the Ootori Striker pack makes it. You'll see it in another pose when I'm talking about the conclusion, when it's kind of descending, holding the large anti-beam ship sword, but it took a lot of effort to even get the stomach crunch forward to work because of how back heavy this kit is. The Ootori Striker pack keeps wanting to pull the torso backwards, which is why I said it was a good thing earlier that the back articulation in the ab crunch is limited, because if it wasn't, this kit would be flopping all over the place, as we see in the early seed real grades, which was a big problem there. But this is a very iconic pose for a reason. It looks great. It really shows off all of the extremely varied geometry with the Striker Rouge kind of taking up a lot of space, demonstrating a lot of the gimmicks that come with the frame, with the armor slide gimmick, with all of the exposed dark frame accent parts, kind of giving splashes of variety all across the kit, letting the super over-the-top angular geometry play out. This is an excellent pose, and I would definitely consider having the Striker Rouge do this on the shelf. So in conclusion, the Master Grade Striker Rouge with Ootori Striker pack is definitely a kit with great value. For what you get in the box for around $51, I believe it was, this is definitely a very impressive display for that price. This definitely feels, the Ootori Striker pack itself feels aesthetically like a predecessor to something like the Jet Striker, which is what the Gundam uses, one of my favorite Striker packs. I love how that looks. The very fighter jet aesthetic of the Ootori Striker pack is certainly unique and definitely adds a lot of value to this kit. In addition to the weapons display being pretty close to something you would see on like the Perfect Strike for nowhere near Perfect Strike prices. Like, I think if you wanted that kit, you would need to buy an Aile Strike RM, which is anywhere from like $45 to $50 or something, in addition to getting the Launcher and Sword Striker packs. I think they're on P Bandai right now for an August release for another $31. So if you wanted a Master Grade Perfect Strike, you would have to be paying around the ballpark of $75 to $80 or so. Meanwhile, you can get this kit, which has a bit more of a unique aesthetic with its very fighter jet-like backpack, in addition to having a lot of the weapons that you would want to see in a perfect strike. You have the large anti-beam sword, you have 2 very heavy cannons, of course the fighter jet wings itself kind of mimics an Aile Strike pack, in addition to being able to display it with the standard Aile Strike's shield and beam rifle, which I think look fantastic as far as standard equipment go. This is one of my favorite kind of basic Gundam shields that exist. And the value you get for this kit isn't without its downsides, of course. As you might expect with how over-the-top and heavy this backpack is, getting it to balance on the ground is a big pain, and if you want to use the Strike Rouge's action-base adapter and not the Otori's action-base adapter, that is also a big balance issue. It definitely takes very specific poses to get it to balance, and the problem with that is, while you might just say, oh, just use the action base that comes with the Aile Striker RM, it balances there perfectly. While it does that, it's not very dynamic. You don't really have many options in terms of the angle you want the Strike Rouge to be in, so if you want a super dynamic downward about to slash pose with the anti-ship beam sword, like you saw in my review of the Master Grade Eclipse Gundam, that super dynamic downward flying slash, it can't do it, because the base just simply doesn't articulate far enough for it, and the action base adapter for the Strike Rouge isn't stable enough to hold it in such an extreme pose. So your posability options are a little limited, which is unfortunate, but I don't think anyone was really expecting this kit to have every single posing option in the world with how over the top and heavy the accessory options are, so that's one issue with this kit. With the build, it's mostly very solid. The one issue I would bring up is that is common for the Seed X frame in general, is that it's extremely tight. Make sure you have a set of pliers on hand because for some of the assembly, because it is very difficult to do with just your fingers. It's very annoying and very tight. Make sure to flex the frame a little bit, work it in a little bit before you have it doing any kind of extreme pose, because similar to something like the RG Unicorn Gundam's frame, it's extremely tight, and I am a little worried about something breaking if you try and force it before working in the joints. So just make sure that happens, and also make sure that the legs are fully inserted into the waist. That was another big problem I brought up. It's a common problem among a lot of ABS frames with things like the ARC 72 2.0 frame and the Seed X frame, where the legs, it's kind of difficult to get them fully locked into the hip socket, and if you don't do that, they will pop out when you're articulating them. So just make sure that's fully in. In terms of color accuracy then, that is this kit's biggest downside in my opinion. The base Strike Rouge itself, essentially perfect. It does adjust the proportions from the jank Seed line art where everything's super chunky, but that's fine. I think it looks a lot better in this form than it would if it was fully line art accurate. The big color accuracy issues come with the Ootori Striker pack with the insane amount of color correcting stripe decals, and honestly, it's probably less tedious just to mask off the stripes and then paint them in yourself. That it should be fairly easy to do, and in my opinion, it would probably look a lot better than the color correcting stickers. But besides the color correcting stickers, there are a ton of color apps that need working in. Most notably in the missiles, they're almost entirely color inaccurate. They just come molded in white on the runner. So that's a lot of extra work you need to put into a Master Grade that you really shouldn't have to. With the Master Grade line, you're really paying for having a super accurate model, especially with the modern Master Grades. You're paying for having an anime accurate model, a color accurate model that you don't really have to put a ton of work into to make accurate at the very least. Of course, you can put work in to have a full custom painted build, and that will probably look better than stock, but again, for a lot of people who just want to have a color accurate model out of the box, which is what you would expect from a Master Grade, the Ootori Striker pack isn't really it. So would I recommend this kit? Honestly, yes. If you're not completely put off by having to do either small color apps with yourself with some paint, or the abundance of color correcting stripes on the Ootori Striker pack itself that you can probably paint in yourself, it should be fairly easy to do. This kit looks fantastic. You get a ton of value in the box for the price. Again, for around $30 cheaper than it would take to piecemeal together a perfect strike Master Grade using the Aile Striker RM and the Launcher and Sword Striker packs. This kit has a lot of value in the box, and I think that alone makes it a worthwhile purchase, in addition to having a fairly unique color scheme, and the aesthetic of the Ootori Striker pack itself being very unique with that extreme fighter jet aesthetic, definitely helping it pop, and it is a great model kit and a fantastic addition to any collection. So that was my review of the Master Grade Strike Rouge with Ootori Striker pack. What do you think of this kit? Let me know in the comments below. I really love this design, so I'm really glad I decided to end up picking up this kit, and despite my issues with the color accuracy, I still think it's a fantastic kit worthy of your attention. If you like reviews like these, please consider subscribing to my channel. If you like this video, give it a like, and I'll see you next time with the high-grade Destiny Gundam Revive. I'll see you then.